Well, that's cheered me up today, VooTubers. That's really made my Friday, that has. That sort of augurs well that I'm going to have a nice weekend, that does. It really does. Yes, I've heard that they're going to shut down that bleeding Tavistock Institute. Yes, they are. That Tavistock and Portman Centre Institute of dodgy Mickey Mouse shenanigans, what's been going on at great expense to the bleeding taxpayers, where a load of bleeding weirdo scientists and, well, hiding behind the idea of science and medicine and one thing and another, get to tattle a load of kiddies. Yes, yes, all on the national bleeding health. So, anyway, it's come out that apparently all the families that went there with their children, who obviously had problems one thing and another, which I'm not going to hallucinate on here, they went there, yes, and the doctors, well, they couldn't bloody well wait. They were like, what's it called? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They were a load of Dr. Jekylls, weren't they? Yes, yes, yes. They'd invented, well, they probably had backhanders from the medication companies, didn't they, VooTubers? That's probably what was going on. Yes. So anyway, over the years, they've been sort of putting people up there, like, saying, oh, well, yeah, have you got a problem? Well, you go up to the Tavistock Institute. And apparently what happened was, you see, because it started up in, well, just after the First World War, that Tavistock Institute. Yes, it did. Because it's funny, because the rise of psychoanalysis and psychology and clinical psychiatry and one thing and another directly sort of correlated with the whole sort of First World War and the end of the First World War, at the same time as the drug industry sort of took off as well, VooTubers. That was totally coincidental. So anyway, yes, they worked out that apparently a lot of people in the First World War, they ended up with, I think they called it shell shock, but yeah, I'm not sure whether it was or not, because I'm not a doctor, but I do wonder what happened in the Napoleonic Wars and in the French Revolution and in the 100 Years' Wars and in the American Revolution and then the American Civil War and then the Canada Civil War and then the Civil War they had in China and all over the other bleeding places. Did they end up with people like that with shell shock that you see exhibited by the veterans after the First World War? I do not know, VooTubers, because I weren't even, well, I'm old, but I weren't around then. But I do remember when I was little seeing people that were left over from the First World War and their lives were being just obliterated, they were. So anyway, they come back and nowadays they reckon what they had is PTSD. But I ain't being funny. I've seen some of the bleeding medical things about that. What you can see, the old Pathé newsreels and one thing and the bleeding another. And it don't look like no PTSD what I've ever seen. But that's just me anyway. So anyway, they invented the Tavistock Institute so they could get their meddling little hands in at the beginning of what was going to be a big cash cow for them. That was the zeitgeist, that was. Really sort of marrying up psychology and psychiatry and forensic psychology and all that sort of crap with medicine, basically, in your drug companies. And then the Portman Institute, that came about as it was, well, that was one of the first institutes that actually started to look into the criminal insanity and sexual deviancy and people with psychosexual problems, one thing and a bleeding another. And at some point in the National Health, I don't know when it was, in the 60s or 70s or whenever, they married up the Tavistock Institute with the Portman Institute and came up with load of old shenanigans, what they've been getting themselves around doing with all this trans kids that say, oh yeah, well, I think this, that and the bleeding other about themselves. They're children, and as adults we should have been protecting them, shouldn't we? I ain't being funny. One of my sons spent the first 5 years of his bleeding life wanting to be Thomas the Bleeding Tank Engine. Did I take him down the bleeding station? No, I bleeding well did not. That's the way it goes. I mean, my grandson, he often wants to be a kraken. I mean, do I take him to the reptile enclosure at a bleeding London Zoo? No, I do not. Because sometimes that is how children's brains start. They explore and grow and they go in and out of different situations as their brains are maturing. It don't mean you have to dash them up somewhere and get their bits bleeding well cut off and start pumping them full of bleeding drugs that I might say actually are sold by the drug companies to the National Health at great expense. And I don't want to elucidate it any further to you, VooTube, than to just say that, well, the National Health isn't paid by the secret money tree. The National Health is actually paid by us, all our contributions and our taxes, what go in for them to generally act like a bleeding bunch of weirdos. And anyone with half a brain could have bleeding said that, couldn't they? Anyone could have predicted what was going to bleed well happen. But anyway, the good thing is they've had their cover blown, right? They've been bubbled up and they're getting shut down, and not before time either, because that was what the Nuremberg Code was about, wasn't it? Oh yes, yes it was. I mean, what next? I mean, that's what Dr. Mengele was doing, wasn't he, when you think of it, one thing and a bleeding other. And they always go, oh, Dr. Mengele, he was really out of order. And yet when these people were doing it, oh, that was all totally fine, says all the trans activists that are probably paid by these people to say it to start with. That's all I'm saying, VooTubers. But as I say, it's a good day because retribution is, well, it's on the horizon, isn't it, really? All these little children what have had their lives bleeding ruined because they're a little bit confused, and all of a sudden you've got your Dr. Jekylls and your Dr. Mengele's all getting in there, rubbing their hands, thinking ka-ching, 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 ka-ching for their bank balance. Yes, at the expense of children's perfectly natural inquisitiveness and sort of moments of confusion as their brains develop and as they grow up to be adults and decide for their damn well self what they are and what they're not. Bloody Tavistock bloody institute. It should have been bloody shut down years ago, decades ago, not just now. I mean, it really says something for this country when it's legalised, isn't it? I mean, if you did that at home with your kid, well, that would be out of order, wouldn't it? You'd be a criminal. But you take them up there under the auspices of a tax-funded institute, it's perfectly all right to do that. Shows you where we are as a civilisation and as a society, doesn't it, VooTube? Oh, well, anyway, it's been done. I've had me say, so I'm going to get about my business. Anyway, bye, VooTube, bye, bye.